أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi tasliman kathira. Assalamu alaikum everyone. The topic tonight is not the illusion of depression, as you'll have heard. Depression is not an illusion, but it's depression at its roots. And I've been asked to speak as a consultant psychiatrist, yes, but although we're going to try and understand the medical and scientific explanation of depression, what we want to do as people who believe in the Akhirah, people who believe in one God, is to understand what is at the root of depression, because this is the most common mental illness that we have in the world today. Now, the World Health Organization rates diseases in terms of their burden on people across the world. And interestingly, depression itself, let alone mental illness in general, is rated third in terms of the impact it has on people across the world. And in North America, it's rated first. Countries which are in the grips of war will have an increase of this, but certainly countries which, as the Master of Ceremonies would have said, are at peace will suffer it equally and sometimes to a greater degree. So what do we mean by depression? We all know that it means low mood. We might know that it causes a change in somebody's sleep, whether they sleep too little or they sleep all day. It may cause a change in their appetite, whether they lose their appetite and lose weight, or whether they feel that they are comforting themselves by eating all day and all night. And so, besides these changes, the person can have a loss of concentration, a loss of energy, and a loss of libido. They'll lose their attraction for their husband or their wife. Their behavior at work or at home, their social and their occupational function will suffer. And all of these things are important, and all of these things are things that your GP or your psychiatrist will certainly have a look at if you go and see him or her. But the most important thing in terms of thinking about depression, in terms of the risk factor, the risk of that person making the irreversible decision of trying to kill themselves and succeeding in that, is whether they fall into hopelessness. Because if you are in despair, if you are hopeless, it is entirely logical and it is a very peaceful decision that you should end your life. Because if you know that there's absolutely, or you think you know, that there's absolutely no hope of anything improving tomorrow, that things will never improve again, that there's no hope of anything better to come, why would you continue? But as people who believe in God, we know a lot about hope and we know a lot about hopelessness. So you might hear people talk about mental illness, you might hear people talk about depression, you might hear people talk about suicidality, you may hear people talk about anhedonia, which means you don't enjoy the things you normally enjoy. And these are all interesting words, but what do they mean really to us? And you'll hear sometimes the older generation say that this is a problem for the young people today, we didn't suffer about it in the past. But when you understand that the real problem, the root, the thing that is the foundation of depression, and the thing that leads to the most severe aspects of it, and the thing that crucially leads to suicide is despair, is hopelessness, then that's something we can all understand, and we've always been able to understand. Now, I see, alhamdulillah, there's some young faces here, and many of you younger faces will have heard in the Quran about the story of Yusuf, alayhi salam, which is often read to the youth, because there are a lot of lessons in it for all of us, but especially for the young people. For Yusuf, who was tested by being suffering from the envy of his brothers, of being thrown into the well, of falling into slavery, and of struggling in Egypt initially, and of course being thrown in jail, being falsely accused of trying to take advantage of the wife of Al-Aziz. So we know that story, and we know that as the story continues, Yusuf alayhi salam was a prophet, he was a Nabi, his father was a Nabi, Yaqub alayhi salam, whose father was a Nabi, whose father was a Nabi. So Yusuf alayhi salam had the best lineage of any human who's ever walked this earth. And so when we ask ourselves, what can Yaqub alayhi salam and what did Yusuf alayhi salam teach us about hopelessness, we can say that hope and hopelessness are throughout the Quran, but Yaqub alayhi salam said some beautiful words. Many of you will remember when the brothers came back having lost not simply Yusuf alayhi salam, but many years later during the famine, when they went to Egypt to ask for grain, and Yusuf alayhi salam, under pretenses, pretended that a goblet had been left in the luggage and that Binyamin was kept back because he recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. Yaqub alayhi salam said to them, now remember this is many years after Yusuf alayhi salam has disappeared, Yaqub alayhi salam said to them, go and look for whom? He didn't say go and look for Binyamin by name. He said go and look for Yusufa wa akhi. Go and look for Joseph and his brother. Now Joseph had disappeared many, many years ago, and the response of the brothers was to the effects that you're an old man, implying that perhaps he's becoming a bit senile and he's forgetting things. But he reminded them in Surah number 12, Surah Yusuf, in ayah number 87. He said that one should not lose hope of the mercy of Allah, and he said, no one despairs of the mercy of Allah except for whom? Illa qawm kafirun. Except for the people who disbelieve. Now this is not an accusation for us to be upset about. This is not for us to think that if we fall into depression that we have got no faith. Sometimes people accuse people, your iman is weak. People say that brother or sister, you should just have sabr, and if you had a better iman, if you had a better relationship with Allah, all of this would go away. Now I can tell you that when people hear this who are in that difficulty, regardless of the good intentions of you saying that, it is not something they want to hear. It's not something that's easy for them to hear, and it's not necessarily something that is helpful for them to hear unless you try and be soft with them and explain what you mean. Yaqub alayhi salam is telling us that if you have faith in the existence of God, if you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then by definition you should know that hopelessness is a lie, that it is never true that there's no hope of Allah's mercy, because we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could give you a solution from a direction you don't see. We know that if you're buried in a mine shaft as a miner and you don't think anybody's going to get you out, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the rescuers to reach you, He's going to reach you. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the other hand wants to drown Fir'aun, He's going to drown Fir'aun. So nobody loses hope of the mercy of Allah, illa qawm kafirun. So that beautiful understanding shows us that regardless of how black things are, regardless of how miserable things have become, the despair or the hopelessness that is underlying one's suicidal thoughts is a lie. And that's a comfort for us, because when we feel that despair, we don't say, oh my goodness, I am of the people of kufr. We say, ah, I see, these are the lies of shaitan. And if you fall into fear, and we're not going to speak about anxiety to any great deal today, but that which underlies anxiety, the foundation of anxiety is excessive fear. All anxiety, whether it's obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety, panic disorder, and panic attacks at its most extreme. The problem underlying all anxiety is a fear which is disproportionate. And of course, as Muslims, we know a lot about fear too. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about fear in the Quran. He tells us that, well, firstly, we shouldn't fear anyone or anything on this world. And if you did want to fear somebody, who should you fear? You should fear Allah, in terms of not doing wrong. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us very interestingly that shaitan uses fear to make us fear his, shaitan's awliya. And we remember when the Muslims were told that there was a big group massed to fight against them and that they should be afraid in a time when they were in a minority. What did they say? What did those Sahaba say? They said, Hasbunallahi wa ni'mal wakil. Sufficient for us is Allah and the best disposer of affairs. So in a time of fear, they trusted Allah, they took refuge in Allah, and whatever happens afterwards, they were happy with Allah's qadr. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that they were seeking the favor of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then was able to complete His blessings upon them. So whether you fall into despair and you realize that this is hopelessness which is based on a lie, because there's always hope of Allah's mercy, or whether other fears surround you and issues of anxiety swirl around, and that's separate from depression, but if those come in as well, then we know again that that is one of the tools of shaitan. So when we experience that, it's not that we say that the depression is not real. And so the initial topic of depression, the illusion of depression, is a bit of a misunderstanding in the sense that the only illusion is that of the hopelessness. And so we understand that the thing that you're in, the grief that you're in, the tears that you feel, the loss of appetite, the loss of sleep, those are all real things. And indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that it is He who gives laughter and tears. So we know that laughter and tears are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you are the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and you've lost your beloved Khadija radiallahu anha, those tears are real. If you today have lost your job, lost your child, lost your wife, lost your husband, through whatever means, whether you think it's fair or unfair, whether you were cheated on or not, whether you were dismissed unfairly or not, those tears are real, that grief is real, and those tears are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that He tests us both in things that He gives us, and we should have shukr for those, and in things that He tests us of pain and deprivation. And that's an opportunity for the sabr that I said people often advise people to do, but we need to understand why. So we know that all of these things come only with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because again, some people will say, and some from certain cultures more than others, that, well, the problem with my brother is that a jinn has possessed him. Okay? Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm not going to fight with people, I'm going to read Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, what does He say that shaitan is going to say on the Day of Judgment? Is shaitan going to say, well, you know, I was in charge of controlling these people and so I'm responsible for them? No. Shaitan is going to say, I had no power over you, but I called and you followed. So if Iblis himself is going to disavow having controlled us, but admit that he called us, the waswas are real, and we chose to follow, then we need to understand that yes, you can have a psychotic illness. Somebody could have schizophrenia, which again we won't go into too much detail today, but psychotic illness would be characterized by delusions which are false and fixed beliefs which are out of keeping with the person's social background. So they'll believe that, you know, I won't say in a Muslim community you think that the police are listening to you, because maybe they are, but you believe that, let's say, there are aliens in your basement, or you believe that your mother, may peace be upon your mothers, that you believe that your mother's from Mars, or you believe that your neighbor is a lizard and they're going to attack you. You know, things which are clearly nonsensical. So people who have delusions will have these beliefs. They may believe additionally that the FBI are after them, and that may or may not be true. But in addition to delusions, the people can suffer from hallucinations, where they have perceptions without stimuli. Now, perception is the things that you see, and I see, mashallah, lots of lovely people around me. Things that you hear my voice, things that you feel. People who drink alcohol heavily and who withdraw from alcohol sometimes feel things are crawling on their skin, or things that you taste. So in any of the five senses, something that you sense that is not actually there is a hallucination. So if you have delusions and hallucinations, that's a psychotic illness. And of course, if you're in the grips of an active psychosis, if you think that your neighbor is a lizard who's trying to kill you, and you go and you kill your neighbor so that you can have a good night's rest, you're insane, and the pen is lifted from you. But unless you're insane and the pen is lifted, in other senses, you may have some volition, you may have some active control over your actions. And so we shouldn't lightly and blithely and recklessly say the fact that my brother's not eating and that he's not concentrating and that he's losing weight is because the jinn has controlled him. Because shaitan is going to disavow much of that on the Day of Judgment. So we need to understand what's happening. But if we fall into despair, we will fall further into these problems and potentially be suicidal in our thinking and in our intent, and fall into doing something which is certainly not good for us in this world or the next. So what do? We know that these difficulties, and indeed the good things that come to us, are only with the permission of Allah, so we seek refuge in Him, and we turn to Him alone. And so I'm not here today to tell you to go and see your psychiatrist if you fall into low mood. In fact, in most cases, you probably won't need to. But I'm saying whether you go and see your GP or not, whether you go and see a psychiatrist or not, and indeed, hopefully you go and see your local imam first and foremost, if you need help, if you need guidance, if you read the Quran and ponder it on your own, you understand that whomever you're going to see, you are first and foremost asking your Creator to help you. You are seeking refuge in Him because He knows that He can see this problem. He knows how you've come into this problem, and He knows what the reasons are. You know, Musa alayhi salam, Moses didn't know everything, and Khidr was there to show Moses, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there were things he didn't know. And of course, Khidr and Moses' knowledge was like a drop of water in the ocean. So we can never know everything. And we can't know why this terrible thing has happened. We can't know why a child was abused. We can't know why a husband has done something awful. We can't know why we've lost a limb. We can't know why we've been in a war situation. But we can know that this is with the permission of Allah and that we take refuge in Him alone. And certainly, when Abu Bakr Siddiq was in the cave with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he thought that, you know, if the Quraysh just looked down, they would see them in the cave. And the Prophet Muhammad said, you know, what do you think of two people when Allah is their third? So we know that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to help us, He can help us. And if we are going to die in the problem that we're in, if we think that's going to happen, even if we approach that with the right attitude and do the best that we can, then things are good for us in this world and the next. And you will say, well, that's all very well, but you know, I've got depression. I went to my GP, gave me these lovely Prozac tablets, and they helped me. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know, received the dua of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where the Prophet prayed for ilm, knowledge which was beneficial. And so knowledge that's beneficial, whether it's medication or psychotherapy, is not necessarily out of the question at all. But you need to be praying to Allah first, second, and third, first and last. And anyone who helps you, you accept as just an agent of Allah's mercy, an agent of Allah's help, but that it's coming from Allah alone. So when your wife has a healthy baby, or when you as a woman have a healthy baby, you shouldn't be thanking the obstetricians. Yes, give them a box of chocolates. Thank Allah. You know, the person who's in the ship, in the storm, and is praying directly to Allah, what happens when the ship comes to shore safely? They forget Allah sometimes. So we shouldn't be of those who remember Allah in hardship and don't remember Allah in goodness. Or equally the opposite, not be of those who remember Allah in goodness but forget Him when we're in difficulty. We should remember Allah always and know that we're being tested in the good days and in the bad days. And in the last two ayahs of Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us there that nobody is tested more than they can bear. But we also know that we still pray to Allah to help us not be burdened more than we can bear and not to be burdened more than the people of those before. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being very merciful, and He's enforced upon Himself mercy. And no matter what black situation we are in, no matter how difficult it is, we know that this is with His permission, and that we can turn to Him and beg Him to make it easy for us and to help us. And then of course we go forth and we try and seek all agents of help that we can. Because what I tell my patients, because in the NHS I can't tell my patients to open the Quran, and you know, I can't do that, unfortunately. So what I tell my patients is I ask them open questions. I ask them whether they make the rain fall. Usually they say no, usually. Those who say yes, I know they need to be locked up. I ask them if they make the sun shine. Usually they say no. And those who say yes, well, we know what we have to do. So those who admit that they don't make the rain fall or the sun shine, I have them agree that they don't absolutely have control over everything. Okay, we agree with that. So why do you think you're in control of your husband's life? Why do you think you're in control of the rizq that's coming to you? Why do you think you're in control of your health, whether you have cancer or not? Why do you think you're in control of when you live and when you die? So we know we're not absolutely in control. So when somebody comes to me and says, I'm depressed because I've lost control of my life, I say to them, you never had control. That's the happy news. I have never had control. I don't know if I'm going to come to work tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be alive tomorrow. So none of us have ever had control. When things were going the way we wanted them to go, we were happy. But they were just going the way we wanted them to go, and we thought we were in control. The day things are not going the way we want them to go, we say we've lost control. But what we are in control of are our intentions and our actions, our reasonable actions. And if we have the right niyat, the right intentions, do the best amal, the best actions, then thereafter we know that our duty is to have tawakkul, to have trust in God, in His decree, whatever happens after that. And I say to patients who don't believe, I say, you're in control of your intentions, you're in control of your actions. If you do the best intentions and you have the best actions you can have, then I say leave the results to the one who created the sun and the moon, whoever that is. Because certainly you're not in control. You've never been in control. And if you benchmark success on control, you'll be happy on some days and sad on some days purely as a consequence of events. And you've made yourself a slave to things you're not in control of. And if your husband's affection is what makes you happy, then you've made yourself a slave of your husband. If your child's behavior makes you happy, you've made yourself a slave of your child. And if money makes you happy, you've made yourself a slave of gold and silver. I say let's not be slaves. I say let's be free. Let's be a slave of Allah alone. Because He is eternal and all bounty is in His hands. And certainly it is He who gives laughter and tears. And certainly depression is real. And certainly you can fall into tears. But we know that it's not what happens to you, it's what you do that's important. In Surah Al-Furqan, in the last few ayah, it talks about the many beautiful things that the servants of the Most Gracious do, and 3 things that they don't do. And it's, it's mainly the things we do. In Islam we talk about all these rules and regulations we're following, very few really. Because in Surah Al-Furqan it talks about the servants of the Most Gracious only avoiding 3 major things: kufr, disbelief, zina, infidelity or fornication, and murder. And those who do those 3 things, any of those 3 things will be punished in this world and double in the next. But if they repent sincerely, even their bad deeds will be turned into good deeds. But it talks about many beautiful things that they do. But in those last few ayah of Surah Al-Furqan, it says that these people will be rewarded with the highest good, which is commonly understood as the highest levels of Jannah. But why does it say in that ayah they will be rewarded with the highest good? Does it say it will be purely as a consequence of their deeds, purely as a consequence of their salah, purely as a consequence of their zakah that they were giving? It says because of their sabr. And sabr doesn't mean patience on its own. Sabr is a big word. It means perseverance. It means having resolve. And yes, it means having patience additionally. So when you fall into difficulty and you say to the person, oh, well, I've already had good intentions and I'm already praying my salah and I'm already giving zakah and I've been praying to Allah to help me for a long time and it's still not helping, so now I'm going to my GP. I say, hang on a second. I say, you could have gone to your GP earlier. That's not the problem. The problem is that you're saying, my du'as haven't worked, so now I'm going to do something else. And if you think that you're going to turn away from Allah and get benefit anywhere else, you are hurting yourself and you are endangering your own faith. So you say, I'm going to seek all the help I can get from wherever I can get it. And I'm going to be at peace that help will come to me with Allah's grace. When Yusuf alayhi salam asked the man who was being released from prison to tell his master to release him, the man forgot. And he stayed in the prison for some years. But he was praying to Allah directly. And Allah released him when it was the right time for him to be released. So sometimes a good thing can be kept away for us for a little while, but there's a reason for that. And we could still have a very high status within this world if Allah wishes, but certainly on the Day of Judgment and in the Akhirah, inshallah. And we need to have ambition. Asya, who is the wife of Fir'aun, who was such a wonderful woman, the foster mother of Musa alayhi salam, she prayed to Allah, build for me close to you a house in Jannah. So let's not worry about the house prices in London. Let's ask Allah for a house in Jannah. And let's take the trial of depression, if it hits us or somebody around us, as an opportunity not to blame ourselves, but just an opportunity to look at our lives from top to bottom and ask ourselves how we can improve. Not that we're saying we specifically blame ourselves for what's happening, because we can all improve. And we can all improve even if we're not the people suffering from depression, whether it's the person around us. And we can help them in all ways. And the person who is depressed is going to be told by their therapist to have structure in their lives. As Muslims, if you pray 5 times a day, you've got structure already. It's going to tell them to give charity because they found that altruism, charitable behavior makes your mood improve. Well, we Muslims, we know we need to do that anyway. So the things we think are rules and responsibilities are there as a mercy and we don't even realize why. The things that come to us as difficulties, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reasons and we don't know why. But as long as we understand that this has come from Him and that the solution is with Him and that we seek refuge in Him, then we will be always of those who are successful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.